So let's start why you're here this morning, why was it so important to adjust your schedule to be here for NABCO?
Well, here we have this gathering of the officials that get it done. As a guy that came up as a local leader, I was a city councilman. I was the chief executive of New Jersey's largest city. I know that how important the federal policies are, but really the people that get it done for people every single day are on the local level. Their vision, their insights, their expertise are what helps build America strong. And I wanted to talk directly to them as somebody who is a presidential candidate, but also somebody who knows the challenges they have every day.
Absolutely. So let's talk about you're the presidential candidate.
Yes.
You have a lot of colleagues and others that
I noticed that there's more than one, one
yeah,
person in this
there's
race.
quite a few actually. So talk about why you stand out.
Well, I think it's that. My resume is unique in this field. I was the chief executive of a major American city, the largest in my state, and turned it around. We were a city that was known for crime and corruption. Now we're going through one of America's biggest and best comebacks for a city. But that's not the only thing. I am also a United States Senator, so I know Washington and have a reputation for getting things done across the aisle. The only major bipartisan piece of legislation that passed through this president was one that I led from the Democratic side in the Senate with Dick Durbin for criminal justice reform. And so that alone, I think, makes me stand out. And then I'm just one of those people that just thinks that this is not a time where we need to fight Donald Trump on his terms. I have a campaign where I'm talking about reviving civic grace, civility, but more than that, this idea that we need each other. We've got to come together as a country if we're going to solve our problems. We have real urgencies that exist. There's a lot of common pain in this country, but we've lost our sense of common purpose. That's the kind of leader I want to be, not emulating what we have now with trash talking, Twitter trolling, but really speaking to the best of us as Americans, calling us together to get back to the work of this country as our competitors around the globe are catching, and some indices passing us.
So what's your platform? What are you in terms of your candidacy, in terms of what you're campaigning on? What are those key areas?
Well, I always say life is about purpose, not position. This is what I've been fighting for since I was a city councilman, which is we have urgent work to do. The economy is not working for all of Americans. We have people that do not have access to health care, education, retirement security. So many of the core functions that we know should be a part of American rights. If you're American, you should have health care, great public schools, jobs that pay a living wage. Those basic fundamental building blocks are not there for so many Americans. And so that's really what I'm focused on. But I keep reminding people we cannot get there by tearing each other apart. Somehow we as a country, just like I did as a mayor with lots of different constituencies, we've got to bring people together for common cause, for common purpose, and rekindle that sense that we are a nation, as I always say, that needs to put more indivisible back in this one nation under God.
You talked about tearing each other apart. Being in leadership for a long time politically, you're used to probably having some battles, some trash talking, some negativity in that campaign process. I'm sure you're anticipating that here. Why still do it? And what is your take on the negativity that comes out of this process for you?
Well, I believe that you can win elections not by showing the worst of who you are, but the best of who you are. And a lot of times I hear now people say, let's fight fire with fire. Well, I ran a fire department. That's not a good strategy. And even understanding there's a lot of us that are hurt. I had a guy put his arm around me as I walked into a big rally and just said, yeah, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And I said, well, that's a felony. and let me tell you why love is a better strategy. We beat Bull Connor, a demagogue, a bully, not by bringing bigger dogs and more powerful fire hoses, but by rekindling, reigniting the sense of moral imagination in this country. And when you turn on 24-hour TV news, you see the way we talk about each other. We need an antidote to that, because right now, the things we agree on, common sense gun safety, expanding healthcare, retirement security, jobs with dignity, whether you're punching a clock, swiping a card, we know that we believe that everybody should have these things in America. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, these are fundamental to who we are, and we've got to start getting a pathway to getting there as opposed to talking at each other.
So some of the recent polls that are coming out have you lower in the polls compared to the slew of other people that are running right now. Why do you think that is, and what are you going to do to try and get yourself up the ranking?
Well, right now it's name recognition. We're far out, and of course people who've run for president in the past. Our two front runners are people who've run for president in the past, have been very known. But that doesn't concern me right now. What concerns me is getting directly to the people. We've seen in past presidential campaigns that people who are spiking this far out usually aren't the ones that are there in the end. We're doing the fundamentals of this campaign. I'm traveling all around the country, building support. We're leading the pack right now, the last I checked, in endorsements in community leaders like the kind you see here at this great gathering of people who know government, who know what it takes to get things done, whether it's in getting the first endorsements out of New Hampshire, South Carolina, Iowa. So we know we have the good fundamentals for a campaign, the right message, and I'm going to be out there working hard to earn voter support.
So one is the time it takes to travel across the country, but we've also seen how social media plays a role in running campaigns too. How are you going to leverage that for your campaign?
Well, I'm very fortunate to have millions of followers on social media that I built up as a mayor, using social media to actually solve problems. And so I'm excited as more and more people tune in. Our platforms are growing and we're gaining interest and momentum every single day.
So Michigan flipped red with this past election. I'm sure you've probably done some analysis of what happened in our last election. We were Democratic for the last few decades. What's your take on being able to flip Michigan back to blue in your favor?
Well, this is a community I know. I'm here. My mom was born here. My grandfather and grandmother were able to lift themselves out of poverty. My grandfather working on the assembly lines as a UAW worker, my grandmother working as a domestic, and these are folks who were entrepreneurs here in Detroit, opened up a pool hall and gas station. So I owe this city a great debt, but I also have a connection to this city and this state, and that gives me, I feel like, a lot of home turf advantage to talk to folks who are in Detroit who know the city I was in, Newark, had a lot of the same awful reputations, people looking down on you, overlooking you, underestimating you. I have a vision for what a president can do that's really committed to success, whether it's factory town or inner city or rural area for farmers. We have to understand that every place has value, and I think what excites voters is when they know they have a president that's authentically connected to their community, that sees the pain and the struggle people have, but more importantly, has plans and ideas to empower people to succeed.
So is there any broader message you have for just Michigan, just Detroit?
Yeah, well, I am here. I would not literally be running for president. I would not have my family's success if it wasn't for this state. I owe you, and as President of the United States, I'm going to make sure that this state has the resources, the support, the vision it needs from the White House to help this state thrive.
I know you're anticipating getting that nomination for the Democratic Party. Should you not, by any chance, would you consider supporting the person that is in terms of being a part of that cabinet, maybe being VP? Are there any other considerations that you would have?
Well, first of all, every one of us voters, I'm a voter too, should extract from the nominees in this crowded field that should you not be the nominee, you will fall behind and support that nominee. In the same way that we are fracturing as a country, we can't afford to fracture as a Democratic Party. And so I'm going to do everything I can every day, no matter what my title is, to make sure we are successful in our country. And communities like Detroit, for example, are not left behind, that there's a vision for them. And whatever that ends up being in my title, that's not in any way going to deter my sense of conviction that I have as I'm running for president to get the job done. And I've played lots of teams, played football for Stanford. There were times I was a utility player. There's times I got to be the guy catching the pass in the end zone. But you are on the team. And I'm Team America, and this is a state that right now is not, whether it's the tariffs, whether it's the kind of emphasis on giving tax breaks to the wealthiest, whether it's the lack of access to health care, whether it's the so many seniors in this community not being able to retire with dignity. Our team is not getting it done, and I'm going to be fighting really hard no matter what position I'm playing to make sure we do.
Would you consider a VP?
Right now, my focus is to be the nominee and the next president of the United States. Should that not happen, we'll see what happens. But I have a deep faith, actually, that this is where I'm headed, and this is my campaign will win.
Does it intimidate you or bother you at all that so many of your colleagues are in the race as well? It seems like maybe some of you could talk together and support each other, but it's like all one for themselves. We're all jumping in.
Yeah, look, I have a lot of friends, legitimate friends that are in this race, that we talk, we laugh. Some of them showed up to my 50th birthday party last week. So
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. So it was really, really nice. But, you know, I, as a guy who was a local leader who helped turn around a city, I know there's certain things that I look for in a resume that I want for a leader, and right now I don't see that in this field, and that's why I'm running. And I also believe in my values. Like I want my party to be defined not by what we're against, but by what we're for. Not define ourselves by beating Republicans, but a larger purpose to define ourselves as the party that's seeking to unite Americans in common cause. And so I see a lot of themes of people running out there. I'm really trying to run with this idea that we need to understand what patriotism really is, which is love of country. And you can't love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And if you're spewing hate or demeaning people, that says a lot more about you than who you're talking about. We need leaders that are ultimately in this complicated, difficult global environment can bring this team, can bring our nation back together. Not everybody's going to get on board, but there's enough common ground. If we seize that, we can be a light unto nations, and I think that's our call.
So let's talk about what's going on in Washington right now. William Barr, he testified just yesterday in front of the Senate Judiciary. What's your perspective, thoughts about the outcome there?
Well, this is stunning. I mean, he even got a rebuke from Mueller in the way he was casting that report in a way that seemed much more like he was the president's personal lawyer than the independent attorney general. He's been playing a role more like Rudy Giuliani than he has been playing a role as someone that, hey, here's a report with stunning data in it. I mean, to see a president in over 10 times doing substantive things that can be construed as obstruction of justice, a president's campaign who had over hundreds of contacts with a foreign adversary, literally sharing polling information, literally gleefully at a time when you should be reporting being reached out by foreign adversaries. You were going there to meet with them to try to get data and dirt on your opponent. There's a lot of things in there, lies and deceit over and over again, that people should find stunning and that should merit more investigation. Not an attorney general who's trying to sweep it all under the rug here and say nothing to see here. So this was yesterday was a painful moment for me, that where we should all be unified. The Russians attacked us, that we had people around this president who have been indicted and convicted, engaging activities that we all should be able to say were wrong. He's saying that the American public should be grateful for what's in this report because it exonerates the president, and nothing to see here. So it was a very disappointing day, especially at the time that we know in these 2020 elections, the same adversary, Russia, and possibly North Korea, Chinese, and others, now have a playbook almost of these are the things we can do in coordination with a campaign to try to undermine a democracy. That's unacceptable. We should have a much more unified purpose in doing something about that.
And how about William Barr refusing to speak in front of the House Judiciary?
I think, you know what, you should stand behind the plate. You're supposed to be the umpire. Stand behind the plate and call balls and strikes, answer to the public, not hide in Trump's dugout and just be simply his advocate and a cheerleader for him. It's unacceptable that the Attorney General of the United States of America won't come before Congress, who has the obligation, the constitutional obligation, to provide oversight. This is, again, more erosion of the norms, the democratic norms of our country.
So what do you want to see happen next? What are you and your colleagues going to work on?
Well, we want to see Mueller come before the Senate Judiciary Committee and talk to us about what was in the report as well as the supporting documentation. I think the American public, we just hired somebody to do a big review, a big investigation. The American public should have the public's representatives now be able to ask that person questions in an open hearing. We should do more of a deep dive into the underlying documentation, see a report that's not redacted. We should have transparency here. The truth should be made plain before folks.
So do you think that can happen? Do you think that you can get Mueller in that seat?
I certainly hope so. We're asking for it. I don't think they ask in any ways beyond bounds. And so we'll see what Chairman Lindsey Graham decides to do on our side. I know the House will be asking for the same thing, and we'll see what happens there as well.
Are you in support of pursuing impeachment for President Trump or against?
I think that this is a time where if anybody takes the time to read that report, you will be outraged by what's in it. And there is a clear pattern that shows the potential for obstruction. And this is something that we should investigate and do what we have to do as Congress, see an unredacted report, interview Mueller in open hearings, do a better review of the underlying documentation, and come to a conclusion after that investigation.
So if you get all of that information and it's clear that you can pursue impeachment proceedings, obstruction of justice, You believe that it can be proven. Is that something that you would support?
Well, we believe that you can prove high crimes and misdemeanors. That is clear. I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican president. That's what the Constitution says. A president should be impeached. And so let's follow where the evidence brings us and come to that conclusion after we've done our investigation.
Do you ever think you'll get that unredacted version?
I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful.
And what steps can be taken to get it?
Well, we're working now not only through the Judiciary Committee, but you have leaders in Congress working together on both sides of the Capitol, the House and the Senate, trying to get it done. So we'll see. So, we were fortunate to see a radical turnaround in our school system, now ranked the #1 school system in America for BPI schools, high poverty, high performance for our kids. And I know that folks in Detroit are working really hard to improve our schools here. What we need is a president that's going to support our schools and do that, #1, by supporting public school teachers who are under assault, raising their salary, forgiving their student debt, giving them better tax treatment than we're seeing right now, where hedge fund workers pay less a percentage of their salary in taxes than teachers do. These are things you can change to relieve debt from teachers, to empower teachers economically and attract more people to the profession. And then we could get literally millions and millions of more dollars in our Detroit public schools if the federal government fulfilled its commitment to fully fund special needs education, which is what I'm committed to doing. And that alone would give Detroit the resources they need to take care of all of our children and to stop what often is the squeezing of the budgets as they're trying to make up for what the federal government is not investing.
You talked about the turnaround in the education system in Newark. What do you see? I know you mentioned better pay for teachers. What are some other areas that can be key in helping to improve the education system here?
Well, a lot of our problems with our schools is that they're being starved for resources. So I think that you give local communities better opportunities to make the choices for what works for their kids. I believe that this idea of self-determination is really important, that local communities know what's best for their kids, that we don't have a one-size-fits-all education system in America. But I think the pressures that they often face is that with strangled budgets, how can we attract great teachers into the profession, and how can we have resources to know that, hey, in this school we should have the best automotive technical training program. In this school, it's a magnet school. We want to make sure that we have the best AP classes. A lot of times we're taking money away from these things because of being cash strapped and really having just terrible choices to make. I think it's the federal government in fact, the Department of Education was formed around this idea of equity to make sure that your zip code doesn't determine your destiny. Well, we're not there yet as a country. And the federal government should be funding schools in a way that helps to make sure that lower income districts have the resources they need to make sure they can take care of the greatest natural resource our country has, which is not oil, gas, or coal, but the genius of our children.
Very well said. Your relationship with Senator Stabenow and Peters
is phenomenal.
What would they say about you and your run for president?
You know what, they are really fast friends, and I'm grateful for both of them. We've worked on a lot of really good issues together, and I know that they are, like every American right now, seeing a lot of great folks run out there, and I think we've got to make our case, as I plan on doing over the coming year as we go into 2020, to make my case to the American public about why we should have a former chief executive, a senator who gets things done, and someone in this climate that really is going to be a force of unification and redeeming, not demeaning and division.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you
Appreciate
for having
it.
me. No, thank you.